Week one recap. It's time for the week one recap. I'm going to be doing this one alone. I'll just get that out of the way in the beginning. I've said it before. I'm probably not going to be reaching out to people to do this. So if you have interest, you have to contact me. There was one person who did have interest, and it was Andrew. But as we know, Andrew is a very busy and important person. And so he only had a very small window where he could have done this. Very small window because, Andrew has all of these just, it's incomprehensible the importance that's going on in his life. So if I wasn't able to meet his very strict little, window that he gave me, he wasn't able to be on. So I guess that's all of our collective loss that we weren't able to get Andrew on this week. Maybe we will in the future. But yes, I'm going to be alone, which means that this thing won't be as disgustingly long as it would have been otherwise. And so that's why I'm quite content doing it right now. I've started this recording at 1:15 in the morning. We'll have our first fab processing in the next couple of hours. ESPN claims it'll be at 3 a.m. That would be great. That'd be awesome. But we know that sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, 5, 6. You just never know. And yeah, we'll see. I'll talk a little bit more about Fab. But let's get into the week one headline. Before I looked at one of my timestamps things from last year, I forgot that I did this every week last year, a headline. And the obvious one here is how poor NFL offenses were, and specifically passing offenses. Here's a couple of statistics that I found on the Twitter X app. This from WTF Stats, at WTF Stats. NFL quarterbacks averaged 188.3 passing yards in week one. That's the fewest of any week in 17 years. I mean, is that true? I don't know, but it sounds like something that makes sense. And also, this I know is accurate because it's from a legitimate source, Steve Palazzolo, at Steve Palazzolo. Week one NFL passing touchdowns, 34. 34 this week. Think about that. There's 32 teams, so just over one per team. 37 last year, but then you look at the 4 years prior to that, 51 in 2022, 61 in 2021, 52 in 2020, 61 in 2019. So the last 2 years, it has fallen off a cliff. Passing touchdown production, offensive production early in the season. And it's no coincidence to me that it's coming now in an era where the preseason essentially doesn't exist anymore. Many star players sit out the entirety of it, and a good amount of just starters in general play maybe a series or two. And so the first 2 games end up serving as the preseason of sorts. And then you have some of these big name players who held out, missed practice time, guys who were banged up and missed practice time. And it just leads to this situation where it's pretty ugly early on. And so that's why a common theme that you'll be able to take away from what I have to say here is I'm not making too many big judgments off of week one. Not many overreactions for me because I'm not putting all that much stock into it. Give these teams a few weeks, give them a month to kind of work out the kinks, I guess. But yeah, let's move on and let's get into our matchup review, matchup breakdown. We got to start with the highest scoring team Matt Nothdurft, 137.23, defeats Jake Krieger, 112.18 in a good matchup. And for Nothdurft here, he ends up with the best ad of the week. And his team's MVP, Vikings defense and special teams, 22-8 from them. You get over 20 points from your defense. You get 13 points from the kicker position. So 35 points out of those two spots. Obviously very helpful. Lamar Jackson had a really nice game. 27.85 from him. How many rushing yards for Big Lamar? 122. That's why you draft him. That's why you draft him. He only had one total touchdown in this game, and he still ends up with nearly 30 fantasy points. It's because you get 12 points just off of rushing production alone. That's huge. Rest of the team, you look at it, Alvin Kamara, you got to be very happy if you're Nothdurft, because you're getting 20 touches in this game in what was a blowout. He got into the end zone. 5 receptions as part of those 20 touches. Alvin Kamara, as long as he can stay healthy, should be productive, because they really have nobody else. Their backup running back, no joke, right now is Taysom Hill. He was the second guy in the running back rotation. Jamal Williams saw work in garbage time, but Taysom Hill's their backup running back right now. So Alvin Kamara is probably going to get all he can handle for as long as he can stay upright. And I've been critical of Kamara in the past, and I kind of think he's nearing the end. Obviously, he's nearing the end, but volume is what it is. And if you're seeing 20 touches regularly, you're going to at least be running back 2 with the possibility of being even better. Kyren Williams, hey, all the worries, the preseason concerns of, oh no, he's going to return punts now. Guy saw a 91% snap share. So, hey, he could return punts all he wants as long as he's seeing 90% snaps. He's the obvious workhorse right now that he was last year. Does Blake Corum eat into that as the season goes on? I think that's possible. Williams needs to be better than he was this past week. He ended up with 54 yards on 21 touches. That's horrendous, and kind of in continuation of what happened last year. But McVay trusts him. McVay likes him. And so for now, there's no need to worry. But it's something to monitor, because if he continues to be inefficient, maybe Corum does start to eat into it. But obviously, that coaching staff doesn't view that he's ready right now. Rest of the team, you look at it, Rashee Rice was good. He ends up with a 100-yard receiving game. No touchdown is why, not as huge of a fantasy performance. In this half PPR format we're in now, touchdowns they're very important. So, yeah, you end up with a 100-yard game, but nothing crazy from a fantasy standpoint. David Montgomery was big down the stretch too. He did most of his damage in overtime. I think he had, I'm seeing it here in the write-up, I was going to guess that he had 50 yards and he scored the game-winning touchdown. It was 45 yards on that overtime possession. So 10.5 of his 15.8 points come in overtime. But promising that he still saw the workload that he did. Before overtime, he had seen 14 touches. That's pretty good, especially in a game where they were throwing it a decent bit. Garrett Wilson was all right. He essentially did nothing. I think he had 4 catches on 1 possession and then 2 the entire rest of the game. Not too worried about him. Facing a really tough defense, I thought he was fine. And frankly, I thought Rodgers looked pretty good. Little bit better than I expected him to in his first game back. So really, things are looking quite up for Nothdurft. You're not going to get 35 points from the defense and kicker spots every week, but you also feel like there's room for improvement from Wilson and maybe Kyron Williams as well. And then, hey, on the bench, you got to point out here, Jamison Williams. This was a guy I did not have all that much interest in this year, but this was a great flyer to take because this is a really talented player in a very good offense. And if he was able to put it together, he's going to be really good. And early indications are that he is a changed player. 9 targets, over 100 yards, a touchdown, explosive plays, which you expect from someone with his speed and athleticism. He looked damn good. Is it going to be this way every week? Probably not, because Amon-Ra will get his, Sam Laporta will get his. And they'll have games where they just want to ram it down your throat with Montgomery and Gibbs. But the fact that Williams is proving capable of doing something like this, to me, already means he was worth taking in the 9th round, because this is a guy that you can realistically plug into your flex spot any week and feel good about because of the ceiling that he represents. So, yeah, I'm liking what Nothdurft's got going on. Tight end is the black hole spot. Going to have an entire portion of this recap dedicated to my thoughts on Isaiah Likely. But this is a team that you would certainly expect to be in on Likely. I'll give a little bit of a tease. I personally don't think Likely is worth it. But when you're desperate at the position, you got to do what you got to do. You got to maybe take a chance and hope that it works out. Let's move on to the losing side of Krieger. Another, amazing defensive performance. Bears defense goes for nearly 27. And that was huge. That's the reason that Krieger wins in the second matchup. He beat Lorran by 10 points. So if you even get 15 out of the Bears defense, you're looking at losing in the second matchup and starting your season 0-2. But you got that big performance courtesy of Will Levis and his mind-numbing mistakes. A little bit worried about some of what's going on here. Like Nothdurft, Krieger has a black hole at tight end. He has Saints backup running back Taysom Hill in that spot. And I like Taysom Hill. I think he's a fun guy to have because on any given week, Taysom is capable of scoring 25, 30 fantasy points. And there aren't many guys at the tight end position who can give you that. But the flip side of Taysom is that 75 or so % of the time, he gives you nothing. And that's what happened this week, 4.1. And more often than not, that's about what you're going to get. So that's not a long-term solution at the position. And also starting Justin Fields. So, you go into week 1 and you look at some of the guys Krieger has in: Fields, Josh Palmer, Taysom Hill. This feels like a lineup that you would have seen in like week 8 on a snake-bitten roster with injuries and buys. Not the group that you're sending out there at full strength. But, it is what it is. Fields, hey, like Lamar, if Fields continues to start, I actually think it was a genius move by Krieger to add him. I think we said this when we did our draft recap, him and I think we mentioned that Fields would be an interesting guy. And here he is week 1 starting. He carried the ball 14 times. And so, yeah, you're going to have weeks with Fields 100 yards rushing and a rushing score. And you start your week off without even including anything from the passing end with 15 plus points. So, yeah, for a quarterback needy team, I like what he did going out and getting him. I would like to see, Krieger being able to get kind of a steady pocket passer as well. And you create that tandem of maybe you have Stafford or Goff or Tua Tagovailoa. I think he's available in our league. One of those types of guys who's a little like high floor, low ceiling, because Fields is the opposite. Fields' sky-high ceiling, but the floor is horrible because the floor is he gets benched and he doesn't play, or he does play and he's just horrific and gets taken out mid-game, which is even worse because you might end up getting like 4 points out of him. So that's the concern with Fields. The wide receiver position for Krieger is not strong right now, and that's because he went so running back heavy. What was it, 4 of his first 5 or 5 of his first 6 picks? But there are some encouraging options. Xavier Worthy obviously looked electric. He had 2 touchdowns on 3 touches, and that's not sustainable. But you have a big play guy like that in one of the best offenses in the league, and that becomes an interesting, essentially flex. Krieger, he'll have to start him in one of his wide receiver positions, but it's kind of the flex for your team. And then George Pickens looked good. He had 7 targets. Obviously, he's going to be the main guy there. Deontay Johnson gone. Pickens, I think, should be pretty solid this year as long as the quarterback play is even respectable. Josh Palmer, I'm not big on. He's gotten I said this in the draft recap. He's gotten opportunities. He's never shown much. I don't think he's good, and it's going to be a run-heavy offense. But Terry McLaurin, you hope that as Jaden Daniels progresses in the season that he'll at least become a decent starting option. He was not here in week 1. And then, hey, Brian Thomas, this was a guy I was intrigued by coming into the season. Just freak athlete. He ends up with a really impressive touchdown. Nice throw by Lawrence. And only 4 targets. You don't like to see that. But again, for a debut, you end up with 12.5 fantasy points. That's pretty good. You're hoping that as the season goes on, he kind of pulls away from Gabe Davis and Kirk and becomes the number 1 receiver for that team. I think that's very possible. So, yeah, the wide receiver group, not the best looking for Krieger, but it's got potential. And then the running backs, that's the strength of the team. They were all just fine. Bijan, Josh Jacobs, Rachaad White, they were fine. Ramondre Stevenson had a big game on the bench. 28 touches. That's not going to happen every week because New England's going to be trailing quite a bit this season, most likely. They had a game here where they led all day long against Cincinnati, and that enabled Ramondre to just be a workhorse. But it's nice to see that this new coaching staff, they will lean on him when they're playing in a neutral or positive game script. Yeah, as far as Bijan goes, he was still able to put up 13.6. It feels very similar to last season for him, where did about all he could given the struggles of his offense. They put up 10 points. They're facing a strong Steelers defense. 5 catches is good. You love to see that. And Kirk Cousins struggled with mobility. And so you would think that those receptions will stick around for Robinson. You just want to see touchdowns, right? That was the thing that kind of hurt him last season. That was what held him back. I forget what the exact total was. I'll find it here in a second. 4 rushing touchdowns. How many receiving? Come on, let's load. Dealing with this fucking 100-year-old computer here. I got to replace this thing. Yeah, you end up with 8 total touchdowns last season. I mean, not horrible, but if he could get that up to 12, it's a big improvement. That's what would allow him to enter that elite echelon that you're hoping for him to. Josh Jacobs was not very effective. And but again, like, he should be the workhorse there. Rachaad White, yeah, he should be the workhorse there. Like Bucky Irving, he flashed, but this team trusts White. It's kind of like the Kyron Williams thing with the Rams. Like, are they the best talents in the world? No. But their coaches like them. They're good in the passing game. They're just solid and they're reliable. And that keeps them on the field. And that's good enough in fantasy football. So yeah, we'll see with Krieger. I think the bones are good here on this team. Like I like the foundation. It just needs some time to come together. But with him and his management, I trust that it will. I think by mid-season, this will be a strong team. All right, let's move on to the next best matchup of the week, and that's Sam taking me down 123.06 to 113.86. Another quality matchup. Between these two matchups, you might have, four of the five or six best teams in the league. And it showed in week one. We'll start on Sam's side. Hey, matchup MVP goes to the man who was detained in the morning. Back on the team that has made him their logo for a long time. Tyreek Hill, 22.5 points. He had that vintage 80-yard touchdown, 12 targets. The man's a stud. The man is an absolute stud, and until he slows down, I don't know that there's anyone you'd rather have. I had talked to a few people before the season started. I said I would take McCaffrey first, but I'd be real tempted to take Hill. Like, to me, Hill was the other guy who had a real strong claim to being the number one pick. You just know what you're going to get. And great start to his season, despite the fact that he was in quite the incident heading to the stadium. The two Buccaneers receivers, I was saying in the draft recap, I was worried about their ability to perform in the same game. They did just that. Combined for nearly 40 points. Now, part of it is Washington has a bottom five defense, horrific defense. Baker Mayfield just carved them up. And so that's not going to happen every week. And you look at Mike Evans' 6 targets. That's actually not going to happen every week either. That's going to go up. So ultimately, this is probably about as good as it gets for those two guys combined in the same week, but you still have to be really happy about these early returns of the production that you got. And it helps Sam win the matchup because you look at it, and if they had combined for more like 25 to 30, you end up losing. And so it was big to get them into the end zone a combined 3 times. Devon Achane. I mean, the guy is just, he's incredibly explosive. And the talk all summer was that the passing game involvement was going to go up, and it sure as hell did. 7 catches, 76 yards. That's where he did really all of his damage. He did not do much on the ground. He got into the end zone. That was a big thing for Sam this week, touchdowns, right? You get one from Achane, one from Hill, 2 from Evans, 1 from Godwin. That was key. Getting to the end zone that many times. The bad news for Achane is he banged up his ankle at the end of the night. Well, it wasn't the night. It was the end of the day. They played in the afternoon. My mind is always on night because I'm a man of the night. Anyway, Achane getting banged up sucks because that was the real concern with him, right? Is he going to be able to stay healthy? He couldn't last year. He's small in stature. And here he is already. Already you're dealing with this shit after 1 week, and it sucks because few are more exciting than him in the entire sport. But yet, is he going to just constantly be one of these guys? I hope not. He's probably not going to play Thursday on a short week. You hope to have him back week 3. But they got to monitor his touches. They got to be careful with him. And we'll see. I don't know what my stance is on him. I think I still feel similarly to what I did preseason because I figured these types of injuries would happen with him. I think most did. You just didn't want it to happen week one, but regardless, it's something to monitor, and it's going to really hurt Sam's team if he can't stay healthy because the rest of this running back group is very uninspiring. Zamir White, I planted a flag in the draft recap that I was out completely on Zamir White. Krieger said the same thing, completely out on him. I called him this year's Alexander Madison, and here we are. Funny enough, Alexander Madison is the reason that Zamir White didn't produce in week one. Zamir White ends up on the field under 40% of snaps. And it's because Alexander fucking Madison was the guy in there on passing situations. He ends up taking I forget if it was a screen pass or a swing pass or just a check down. I forget what it was. He takes it 31 yards into the end zone, and he was the guy who was in there when they were trailing, when it was third and longs, when it was 2-minute situations. He was the guy. That's really concerning for Zamir White because the Raiders, you would think that they're a team that's probably going to be trailing quite a bit this season. So if White is the guy who's in there when it's close or when they're ahead, and Madison's the guy who's in there when they're behind, that is not good at all. So we'll see. It's not like you say, well, Zamir White's completely irrelevant. He's done now. But it does show that there's legitimate reason to be concerned. Devin Singletary, he was okay. Not much he could do. Just a miserable showing by that offense. I still like him as a low end running back too, like a decent floor option. But yeah, if Achan's banged up, Sam's running back situation pretty quickly becomes the worst in the league. I don't think that there's any argument with that right now. The wide receivers are great, but you need some production out of the running back spot. Sam Laporta, we'll see. He's a guy I was a little bit down on coming into the year just because last season was very touchdown dependent. And sometimes that doesn't repeat itself. Some guys are just annual touchdown machines. But Laporta ends up with 10 last year. And it's like the opposite of what I was saying with Bijan Robinson. If that 10 turns into 5 or 6, that's a big hit. And now you look at Jameson Williams potentially. If Jameson Williams becomes the number 2 target in that offense, that ain't good for Sam Laporta. But hey, I said that the theme of my whole thing here today was going to be to not really overreact, and so I'm not going to. Laporta just had one of the best seasons for a rookie tight end ever. So it's not like he's just going to disappear. But at the same time, if Williams is involved, it's gonna eat into Laporta. And so we'll see. We'll see. Kyler Murray, didn't do much. I think he'll be fine. Nice to see 57 rushing yards out of him. And you hope for more passing efficiency moving forward. But yeah, Sam ends up with a quality week. No guys who really did anything unbelievable, but you get 4 big performances and nobody really killed you. So that's enough to end up the 3rd highest scoring team this week in a bad offensive environment. On the other side, for me, I hate myself at the quarterback position because I really did want to start Jaden Daniels. Horrid vibes around the Bengals. Horrid vibes with T. Higgins out, with Jamar Chase sitting out. waiting for money that he didn't get. Burrow returning from injury, Burrow and the Bengals always struggling early season, just bad vibes. I wanted to stay away from it, but I just couldn't justify in my mind starting a rookie in his debut on the road against a decent defense in Tampa. I just couldn't bring myself to do it, and it ends up costing me the matchup. Easily the worst sit of the week. Terrible sit. Cost me over 20 points. Idiot. Just idiot. And so, yeah, that hurt. Burrow was terrible. Bengals were terrible. And this is what they do. They do this in September every year. And we'll see. We'll see what Burrow's wrist. Again, not going to overreact to it because you're without Higgins. Chase, no reps all summer. Burrow just coming back from an injury. Bengals historically slow starters. Let's give them a month and see where they're at. But all I'm going to say is I'm happy I have Jaden Daniels because I would not want to have to be starting Burrow until he proves that he and they are right. For the rest of my squad here, James Conner was just a workhorse. 19 touches. Love to see the passing game involvement, 3 for 33 through the air. He got into the end zone. Conner, it feels like until his inevitable injury, is going to just be a workhorse. I don't believe he'll get through the season, but I'm going to be happy to have him until he goes down. Pacheco was good. Nothing amazing. He didn't break any long runs. He did have a nice long reception. Nearly had a long touchdown reception as well. Mahomes led him a little bit too much. A ball that Pacheco probably wishes he could have hauled in. You know, just missed it by a bit. And Pacheco scored as well. So good early returns on him. Jamar Chase, hey, yeah, right, he was tied to Burrow, so 6 targets is weird. He wasn't out there. I don't know what the snap count ended up being for Chase. I could try to find that really quickly. I know he didn't play as often as he would have. Because he's still, like, the guy's got to get his legs underneath him. I'm not going to be able to find this. I'm not digging through this shit. It is what it is. He'll be better as long as Burrow is healthy and as long as he's able to get himself into game shape. Deebo Samuel was good. He ended up really stepping into a prominent running game role with McCaffrey out. He had a rushing touchdown. Not worried about Trey McBride in the slightest. He still had 9 targets. Kyler Murray missed him wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. Absolutely fucking wide open. He missed him. Murray missed Marvin Harrison Jr. wide open for what would have been a touchdown too. So yeah, I'm not worried about McBride. I still think very, very highly of him. And Nico Collins had a great game too. Nico Collins stuck a dagger in the heart of Colts fans with just a sensational catch to essentially ice the game along the boundary. I don't know how he caught it. Jalen Jones was draped right over him. I don't know how Stroud fit it in, and I don't know how Collins hauled it in. It was truly remarkable, and it was, just elite players making an elite play to win a game. Yeah, on my bench, I talked about Jaden Daniels. Really happy to have him. That rushing ability, it's why I drafted him. 16 carries, 88 rushing yards, 2 rushing scores. Yeah, that's giving you the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson type of rushing upside. Anthony Richardson. Justin Fields. You want one of these rushing quarterbacks. Kyler Murray. You want to have somebody who can run. It's the biggest thing in fantasy football for me right now. You do not want to be stuck only having a pocket passer, because if they don't throw for 300 yards or 3 touchdowns, they cannot produce. I was happy with Brock Bowers. I think he's really an intriguing option at the position. And then, hey, Jordan Mason. And what can I say? That trade Matt and I made, we make a preseason trade. Jordan Mason was a throw-in. The trade had been, Kittle and Ford for McBride, and then I asked if Matt would include, a bench piece. I wanted Jalen Wright or Jordan Mason. He was willing to do Jordan Mason. And it's just remarkable that just a matter of days later, Jordan Mason ends up dominating against a really stout Jets defense. Jordan Mason was fantastic. 28 carries, 147 yards. And as long as McCaffrey misses time, this is a running back one. I will overreact to that. And because that's always been the case. Whoever has been the 49ers running back in the Shanahan era has been a running back one or a high end two. Doesn't matter who it is. Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson. What other names have there been over the years? There were years, Raheem Mostert was there. Matt Breida. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it's been. They've produced for fantasy because of how fantasy friendly that zone blocking scheme is. I mean, some of these holes that Mason was able to run through were something you'd see in a high school game. But yeah, I mean, as long as McCaffrey's out, Mason is, the value is crazy, and who knows how long this McCaffrey injury lasts. Achilles, that ain't good. That's why I wanted Mason. That's why I asked for him in that trade. So yeah, I'm feeling good about that. Overall, feeling good about where my team is at, but disgusted with myself for not going with my gut of Daniels and kind of overthinking it into sticking with Burrow. Okay, we will move on now and head to Dave Horvath. Dave Horvath, 127.89, taking down his rival Lohan, 102.13. Matchup MVP, weekly MVP, Saquon Barkley in his Eagles debut, 32.2 points down in Brazil. 3 touchdowns, 26 touches. Doesn't get better than that. I was frankly, I was out on Barkley coming into the season. I thought age and injuries and usage would maybe catch up to him. But hey, if week 1 is any indication, that's not going to be the case. Now, we'll see how he holds up over the course of an entire season. There's no guarantee that he will, but man, you love to see that they're willing to ride him like this. You love to see that he had goal line involvement and that it wasn't just Hurts getting shoved in. And you got to feel pretty good. That offense as a whole looked strong. You could not have asked for a better debut from Barkley. 26 points out of the kicker position is a joke. That is nonsense. 6 of 6 for Jake Moody, 2 from 50 plus. Jake Moody made 21 field goals all of last year. He made 6 in week 1. Okay. All right. Moving on. Jahmyr Gibbs quality. And it felt like kind of a floor game for Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Only 15 touches. He did score. And so that's a big reason why he ends up with those 15.5. But he'll be more involved in this. And again, like, let's remember he had a hamstring injury throughout the preseason. So they're not going to just bring him back and immediately give him 20 touches. That would be foolish. Ease him back in a little bit. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think Gibbs is going to be great. Very, very high on him. That Barkley Gibbs combination could prove to be deadly at the running back position for David. I just really like this team. I I don't know how I feel about Mahomes because I'm gonna, going back to that, even Mahomes and all of his greatness, he doesn't run all that much. He has scrambling ability and he uses it when he needs it. But that feels like more of a thing that he goes to in the playoffs. In a regular season, Mahomes is not running for his life. And that's just being smart. But it limits him in fantasy football. We saw it last year where he was absolutely not worth where he was drafted. And it might happen again this year. Now, let's look at his rushing stats. Yeah, like last year, he's never gone over 400 yards rushing. He has 12 career rushing touchdowns. It's just not it's not enough. It's not enough in fantasy football. And so for him to be worth it, because Horvath took him 35th overall, he's got to have that type of season where he's throwing for 40 touchdowns. And he's capable of doing that. 4 times in his career, he's gone 37 plus. But you need that. You need the 4,500 to 5,000 yards passing, and you need the 35 to 40 touchdowns. You just do. We'll see if we get it. Didn't get it in week 1. Didn't get it all last year. So at cost, I don't love Mahomes, but the nice thing with him, you at least know you're gonna get decent performances, right? Like he's not gonna give you 8 point like what I got from Burrow. He's not gonna do that to you, and that's refreshing. I just don't know if the ceiling is there. Uh, the receivers I really like: Waddle, Flowers, Dell. They're all exciting. Dell will be better. 7 targets. He had 2 carries. Dell will be better. Stephon Diggs isn't going to score 2 2-yard touchdowns every week. Jalen Waddle, pretty similar to last year. Like, obviously, he plays second fiddle to Tyreek Hill, but the nice thing about this year was he was kind of drafted as that. Like, last year, Waddle had jumped up to second, third round turn pick, like 20th to 25th overall. This year, he dropped down to more like 40th. So you're okay with him giving you these 14-point performances. And then you know that he has the ability at any time to have an 80-yard touchdown and give you a game-breaking week. Zay Flowers, I like the player. I don't like the offense necessarily because there are going to be weeks where they really don't throw the ball, and then that's going to hurt someone like Zay. But he had 10 targets, so that's pretty damn good. Tight end is now a problem for Horvath. David Njoku is going to miss time. So he's going to have to try to figure that out. Maybe Horvath gets himself in on the Isaiah Likely bidding. Keon Coleman promising off the bench. 4 for 51 on 5 targets. He might end up being the number 1 receiver. My thing cut out. No. These fucking AirPods, They don't last as long as they used to, it seems like. They must be getting old. Uh, yeah. So yeah, for Horvath, good week. You're not going to get 26 out of Jake Moody, but he also only got 1 point out of his defense. I don't know why he started the Browns against Dallas. Obviously, the Browns are a quality unit, but I wouldn't have messed with Dallas. So yeah, when you end up getting 27 total out of the two spots, that's not like insane. It's above average, but it's not ridiculous. Lohan lost here. Kind of a weird week for him. Dak Prescott, they just didn't really need to throw. Um, and again, pocket passer. So under 200 yards, 1 touchdown. That's not going to get it done. Dak will have good games. He'll have games where they have to throw it 45 to 50 times, and he'll throw for 302 or 3, and you'll be happy. But here against the Browns, they're up big early. They end up only throwing it about 30 times, and that hurt Dak. I think Elliott had a rushing touchdown. They had a punt return touchdown. They ended up settling for 4 field goals, which Prescott, deserves some blame for. But better days probably are ahead. Aaron Jones was better than I thought he'd be. I'm actually happy to see that. Aaron Jones has always been one of the most likable players in the NFL to me. Really good guy. Loved seeing him succeed. I just didn't think it was going to work out in Minnesota, but here we are. I'm being proven wrong after 1 week. He goes for over 100 total yards, gets into the end zone. It was against the lowly Giants, so we'll see how it goes in week 2 against a really opposite ends of the spectrum opponent in San Francisco. And then we'll maybe be able to evaluate things a little bit more clearly after that. A.J. Brown, filthy touchdown, 10 targets. A.J. Brown, very good. Nothing new there. And, as long as he doesn't become a cancer like he did late last season, that should be a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 for Lohan. Now, as for the rest of the team, it's not as pretty. ETN had quite a poor game. 12 for 44 on the ground. That's under 4 a carry. He had a fumble in the end zone. And then they just kind of leaned on Tank Bigsby, which is wild. And Bigsby looked great. Bigsby and ETN end up both having 12 carries. Bigsby looked far better. Doug Peterson had said in the offseason that he wanted to kind of split the backfield a little bit more because ETN did fade as the season went on last year. So Peterson said he wanted to avoid that this year. Maybe that's real. And that would be a big problem. ETN went 15th overall. So if this, like, the attractive part of ETN was this idea that he was once again going to be the runaway workhorse in the offense. If this turns into like a 60-40 split, like it was this past week as far as snaps go, and it was a dead 50-50 split in carries, that is a big problem. Again, not going to overreact to week 1. Just throwing it out there that if this continues, it ain't good. But we'll see. Let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Was the usage only because of the fumble? Or is it something that they're actually going to try to do? Time will tell. And then, hey, having the 2 Atlanta, I was so out on Drake London this year at where he was being drafted. He fell in our draft. He was ranked like 20th. He ends up slipping to 34th to Lohan. Nobody wanted him in our league. He ends up with 3 targets in week 1. Now, I didn't get to see any of this game. I've seen that the reports on Cousins are terrible. I've seen some of the some of the film that's been posted, some of the, I mean, some of the spots from Cousins, terrible. Getting nothing on his throws. Right Achilles injury, that's the foot that you have to push off of to generate any type of power. And I don't know. I was really concerned about Kirk and Aaron Rodgers coming into the season. Old, immobile quarterbacks coming off of Achilles injuries. It's not a situation that I want to be a part of. And so I don't know. I would not want to have two Atlanta pass catchers in my starting lineup. They were it was not good in week one. Kyle Pitts, quality tight end production, but again, 3 targets. What saved his day was a touchdown. You get 5 targets between those two guys, or 6, excuse me, 5 catches on 6 targets between those two guys. Terrible. Brandon Ayuk dropped a touchdown. It wasn't, it wouldn't have been the easiest catch in the world, but one that the $120 million man should have made. That would have changed his night greatly. It's going to take some time for Ayuk, probably. Missed all summer. That's what's annoying about these holdout guys. They never step right back in and perform at their peak ability. They just never do. It's going to take a little bit. So yeah, for Lohan, some good, some bad. I do think there are a few more red flags than I'd be happy with. Good bench production. Tony Pollard, he was the clear number one in that Titans backfield. That's a great sign. I believe it was 19 touches to 8 for Tajay Spears. You love to see that if you're Lohan. That's a guy that he could end up plugging into his lineup at some point here. And Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed's got some Deebo Samuel to him where he just finds a way to score touchdowns. He's a guy who you can use in the passing and rushing game. So even with Jordan Love going down, I think Reed will be okay because I think that they're just going to scheme touches to him. And he's just an explosive guy. And I have some regrets for not drafting him because he was someone I was interested in. 31.1, what a performance from him. I don't blame Lohan for sitting him because I would have wanted to wait and see too. They have so many guys there. They have obviously Jacobs, profiles as a workhorse running back, and then you have Christian Watson, you have Romeo Dobbs, you have those tight ends, Kraft and Musgrave, Dontavian Wicks, even as a replacement receiver piece. So there's so many guys there. But yeah, Reed, even with Love out, I feel good about him as a flex. So yeah, this is an interesting team for me, but you'd love to see the Atlanta passing game improve, and you'd love to see ETN not be dealing with Tank Bigsby stealing his thunder. Okay, foster care. Hey, this is this is it for foster care, right? He's got the world on his shoulders right now, all the pressure in the world, and he comes out with a 2-0 week despite getting dealt just a devastating blow on Monday night. Larar 114.87 and 94.6. If you're Larar, you got to feel like what's everyone out to get me here with fucking Christian McCaffrey being ruled out at 7 p.m. on a Monday when there was little to no indication that he was going to miss. And then we find out post game from Jordan Mason, no media training, undrafted free agent Jordan Mason, who's probably never had a big time interview in his life. He lets it slip post game that he's known since Friday that he was going to start. Now, Kyle Shanahan, douche of a human being, maintains that he didn't know until Monday that McCaffrey was out, but I'm going to trust Mason over, Kyle Shanahan, who just seems like one of the least likable human beings in the sport. But anyway, Larar, man, to put up 115 when he essentially was down a starting spot. Like let's just take it as it is. He essentially did not have a running back one, and he still scores 115. Now, a big part of it is Brandon Aubrey with 21 points from the kicking position. Brandon Aubrey, the best kicker in the NFL, by the way. But still, this is impressive as fuck for Larar. I give him a ton of credit. He had the best start of the week. J.K. Dobbins over Najee Harris. That gained him 13 points making that decision. And it would have gained him nearly 13 points even if he went with someone like Christian Watson in that spot. So that was a hell of a move. One, to draft Dobbins, and two, to immediately start him. And now all you can hope for is that that he holds up, because no one's been more injury prone than him over the last few years. And hell, this big performance also came with Travis Kelce doing next to nothing. 4.9 out of Kelce. 4.9 out of Keenan Allen, who left the game at a point. It's yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers did nothing, like most quarterbacks this week. But it was those four big performances, two from Texans players. Now, Diggs, he ends up 6 catches for 33 yards on 6 targets, 2 touchdowns, did quite a bit of heavy lifting there. And that's not going to happen every week. Those touchdowns will go to different players at different times, but it came at the right time for Larar. Joe Mixon was a fucking locomotive. Steamrolled the Colts. 30 carries, 159 yards, 3 catches as well. 33 touch game for Joe Mixon. Sucked the soul out of Indianapolis. And they were a really good rush defense last year. So Joe Mixon, he might still have something in him. That would be huge for Larar. Especially if McCaffrey continues to be out. T. Higgins was out as well. Like, think about what this team dealt with. And it still had the 4th most points in the league. I think it's pretty awesome. What foster care was able to produce. But the concerns are kind of sky high. Like, this McCaffrey situation's bad. Calf/Achilles. That sounds horrible. It's been nagging him for months. 28-year-old running back who has a history of injuries. Yeah, I don't know. And Larar is going to need him. That's obvious. It's just obvious. So needs him to get right. Hopefully he does get right, because this team could be pretty damn good if it has McCaffrey. If he had a typical McCaffrey performance of 20 points this week, he would have been right there with Nothdurft as the highest scoring team. Larar does need to figure out the quarterback position. Rodgers and Watson are not going to cut it. That's not going to get the job done. So that's a huge situation that he needs to figure out. But the rest of it, I like the running back depth. I like the wide receiver depth. You hope that Kelce will be better. I'm a little worried about Kelce because, it just kind of feels like at this point of his career, he does have this low floor. He did last year. There are going to be weeks where they just don't really need him, especially they have other options in that offense. So I'm a little worried about Kelce, but he is still, maybe the best tight end of all time, and he's going to get his. But the quarterback spot and McCaffrey's health are concerns in spite of what was a pretty impressive week. The losing side is Colin. sub 100 points. He lost his quarterback, Jordan Love, for a few weeks. So he, like Larar, has a big hole at the position. But there are guys out there. I don't think it's the end of the world for either of them. You could just play matchups with, let's see, like, who is out there? Brock Purdy, Tagovailoa, Herbert, Goff, Lawrence, Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith. There are guys out there. And so I think that you'll be able to figure it out. I'm not too worried about that for them, but I guess the concern when you don't have one of those elite quarterbacks, the concern is that your floor weekly is awful. And you could end up getting like 7 points from the position, and that's bad. Shocking to hear that, right? But yes, that's bad when you get like sub 15 out of your quarterback. Colin's running backs are very good. Hall and Walker, they both scored. You would have loved to see some more efficiency from Hall, but what are you going to do? You're facing San Francisco. Kenneth Walker, just classic game for him. No pass catching, but he broke a long run, scored. It's kind of the Ken Walker experience, and he usually ends up giving you about 15 fantasy points. It was bad for the wide receivers on this team. Chris Olave, they scored 47 points. He had 11 yards. I just don't know if it's going to work between Olave and Derek Carr. They just seemed it never really came together last year, and I don't know. I still absolutely believe in Olave, the player, but there's something off there. Michael Pittman, I was down on him coming into the year. He had 8 targets. That's good to see, but Anthony Richardson completed 9 passes. So there's not much to work with there for the pass catchers of the Colts. That's kind of the concern. They're going to be a run-first team. And Richardson is a guy who, while he has a cannon of an arm, his touch and those intermediate throws, that's where he still struggles. And that's where Michael Pittman excels. So it doesn't quite line up. But I hope, because I'm a huge Michael Pittman fan, I hope that those two can develop rapport. Malik Neighbors was not very good, thanks to Daniel Jones. I think it's going to be tough for Neighbors to score touchdowns. I think he'll have big games, but that offense just looked terrible. And Daniel Jones looked terrible. And so that's going to hold Neighbors back. It's going to hold him back from being consistent. Brian Robinson flashed on the bench, 16.4. Loved the pick coming into the season. Feel even better about it now. I just think he's better than Eckler. Like, I don't think Brian Robinson's going to be unbelievable. But quality running back too? Yeah, I think he will be. He was last year. I think he will be again this year. The only thing you hope if you're a Robinson owner is that he doesn't constantly get vultured by Jaden Daniels. A la what Lamar Jackson has done to Ravens running backs in the past. But yeah, Colin's got a nice running back group, Hall, Walker, and Brian Robinson. And hell, Alexander Madison, who I shit on for being on a roster. He goes out 14.2 fantasy points thanks to that 31-yard receiving touchdown. Yeah, we'll see with Colin's team. He needs Olave. Evan Ingram was terrible too. I don't think that'll continue. I don't like Ingram very much, but I mean, he'll be better than this. 17 points out of Kaimi Fairbairn. Man, it was a big kicking week, wasn't it? Got a bunch of 15 plus point performances out of that great position. Okay, we got two matchups left. They were both poor. All four teams in the two remaining matchups scored under 100 points. Das Gift, 97.78. Team Waste Basket. It certainly was in its waste basket form, 82.24. Matchup MVP. I don't think I did it for the last matchup, did I? Would have been Joe Mixon for JK I think it's Dobbins for Larar. Matchup MVP for Mecca. Anthony Richardson, 28.2. So Anthony Richardson essentially showed why people were so excited about him for fantasy purposes. 56 rushing yards, a just ridiculous rushing touchdown where he showed what a tank he is. Probably a play that only Josh Allen and maybe Jalen Hurts score on out of quarterbacks league wide. And Richardson also supplied one of the best throws I've ever seen. Slipped on the ground. His own lineman getting pushed back into his face. Another Texans defender in pursuit. And he unleashes off his back foot a 60-yard dime to Alec Pierce. Just such easy arm strength from Anthony Richardson. But at the same time, he ends up under 50% completion percentage. He threw an interception. He missed a couple of open targets, one being A.D. Mitchell in the end zone. So it was kind of the full Anthony Richardson experience. Some good, some ugly, some sensational. And all in all, if he stays healthy, he'll be fun for real life and fantasy purposes. I just hope he does. That's all I can say. I just hope he does. Cooper Kupp. This is somebody we need to spend some time on. I was out on Cooper Kupp. I thought he's old, he's battered, he's done. Now, obviously, he was still going to, in my mind, function as their number two and have good games because he's Cooper Kupp and he has an amazing connection with Stafford. But I thought his days being the number one there were done. I was all in on Puka Nacua. Krieger, that was one of the big things we disagreed on in the draft recap. He was in on Cooper. And I mean, I look absolutely wrong. Puka Nacua, he was injured all summer and then he got banged up in week one. Now he's going to miss a month. And Cooper Kupp, he's back in his 2021-2022 form. 21 targets. 21. No one does this besides him. Him and Matt Stafford have an all-time connection with each other. 14 catches on 21 targets. It's sick. And I think as long as Nacua is out and Kupp is healthy, Kupp is now a top 5 receiver. Yeah. If we redrafted today, would he be a first-round pick? I think he probably would. And again, I remember I don't want to overreact to things, but this is one where you have to because of the injury and because of the targets that Kupp saw. The only concern I have is, will he stay healthy? Because he has not been able to the last 2 years. and now you're going to be having this type of target share, that feels concerning. But hey, they're going to ride him until the wheels fall off, and until the wheels fall off, it's going to be a fun ride. Now, Jerome Ford gets into the end zone. That was the only other player who performed for Mecca. You gotta, hey, if you're Matt, you're happy with who he's not happy about the trade. He told me that he's not happy about trading Jordan Mason, but hell, at least Ford produced in week 1. The rest of the team terrible. Amon-Ra St. Brown showing a floor that was not there the last couple of years. 2.8. And that's got to be his worst game in ages. I think he'll be fine. I think this will absolutely go down as his worst game of the season. So I don't think much of it, but kind of crazy. And again, Jameson Williams, if he's a thing, then I guess all I'll say is St. Brown's floor isn't going to be as high as it was last year. Like he won't have like a 12-point floor anymore. Because if Williams is coming in and getting 10 target games, that's got to eat away from somebody, and it's going to be Laporta, St. Brown, Gibbs. So that we'll see. But yeah, I'm still all in on St. Brown as being a stud. Just man, how about you spend those 2 high picks on St. Brown and Harrison, and they combine for 3.7 in week 1. Mecca's lucky he was able to win this matchup. He's lucky that his opponent really struggled. Harrison should be fine. But this was, my concern with Harrison was that he is even as talented as he is, he's a rookie receiver. And so there's likely going to take some time for him to get acclimated to the NFL. Now, I already mentioned he was going to score a touchdown if Kyler Murray just didn't see him. So that would have changed the narrative of everything. And that's often the case when it comes to fantasy football. 1 or 2 little things here and there change it all. A guy getting tackled at the 1 or a touchdown getting called back on a penalty that then goes to maybe your opponent's player. Little things swing it all the time. But yeah, St. Brown and Harrison, discouraging start. I think they'll be fine. George Kittle, whatever. We know the George Kittle experience. He blows up a few times a year, and the rest of the time he's really not that great. Raheem Mostert already being injured is concerning. Won't pretend like it isn't. But the nice thing for Mecca is that he does have Jalen Wright. And so if Mostert and Achane sit, Jalen Wright should get a chance on Thursday night. Now, Jeff Wilson will be involved. Jeff Wilson was ahead of Jalen Wright for week 1, but this feels very similar to what happened with Achane last year. Achane doesn't play in week 1. Then I think he got a couple, little bit of run in week 2. And I think it was week 3 where he exploded after maybe an injury to Wilson, something like that. Now it's playing out similarly for Wright, where he might get a chance here. And if he looks great, maybe he replaces Mostert, and maybe it becomes Achane and Jalen Wright as the season goes on. I think that was Mecca's. That's probably what he envisioned. He probably thought like Mostert will be my early season guy, and then I'll have Wright to take me home. And maybe that just happens a little quicker than originally believed. We'll see. If you're Mecca, you're just hoping that Jeff Wilson isn't a thorn in Wright's side. Chase Brown, the rest of Mecca's bench, horrible production from Mecca's bench. 12.7 total points. So there are concerns here, but I really like Richardson. Love that 3 wide receiver group he's got. Kittle, he'll have his games. He's going to probably still end up finishing right around tight end 5 when it's all said and done. And then you try to piece 2 running backs together. That's going to be the key for Matt all season. The losing team is Peter, and it was quite an awful showing. 82.24. 1, 2, 3, 4 guys scoring under 5 points. And you score 82 and a quarter points despite getting a combined 27 out of defense and kicker. Like it was the quarterback through flex spots that disappointed. Hurts didn't really disappoint. He ended up with 19.2. So it was the running backs, the receivers, and the tight end who disappointed. You hate to see that. Yeah, Hurts was fine. A couple of interceptions. 13 carries is nice. 33 yards rushing, 8. So nice. And also Saquon being the goal line guy is not so nice because you don't want those rushing touchdowns going down for Hurts. Like, they'll probably go down a bit. You don't want them going way down. And they might if Barkley is just going to be the goal line workhorse. Derrick Henry. Weird game. So, what was it? The Ravens' second possession where they kind of rode Henry. They marched right down the field. He ends up in the end zone. It's looking like, wow. It's going to be the Derrick Henry show. This is awesome. And then he essentially didn't really touch the ball the rest of the night. He ends up with 13 carries, 46 yards, and that aforementioned touchdown. No receptions. That's never been part of him. The terrible news is that he was on the field for under 50% of snaps. Justice Hill is just 100% the passing situations guy. Henry saw the field in none of those spots. So 3rd and long, it's Justice Hill, who ended up with 6 receptions. 2-minute drill before the half, it's Justice Hill. Ravens trailing in the second half, it's Justice Hill. And that is terrible news for Henry's week-to-week floor. Because essentially what it tells you is anytime the Ravens are trailing, Henry's not going to be good. But the nice thing is that the Ravens are expected to be a good team, and so they shouldn't be trailing all that much, right? Like, they play the Raiders this week. That feels like a game where Henry's going to end up with 20 to 25 carries, maybe 2 touchdowns, and you're going to end up feeling really, really good. But you hate to see that, like, Justice Hill, who is really just such a mediocre talent, you hate to see him out on the field in all of those spots. DK Metcalf was awful. Geno Smith was pretty bad. 4 targets. He got the Pat Surtain treatment. Really good cornerback. But, like, 4 targets? The fuck? That just shouldn't happen. I don't know. I had kind of gotten sick of DK Metcalf by the end of last year. He's not that fun of a player to own. Dalton Kincaid. Not good. 2 targets. 1 catch. I said post-draft, I view Dalton Kincaid as the tight end 1 this season. I'm not going to jump off that ship. I saw some of the footage from the game. I mean, they were bracketing Kincaid. There was a play I saw. They quadruple teamed Dalton Kincaid. They had 4 defenders around him. So the game plan defensively for Arizona was we're not going to let Kincaid beat us. And it makes sense because the rest of those targets are very unproven. Keon Coleman, a rookie. Khalil Shakir, he's been decent, but doesn't profile as a game breaker. And then you have like journeymen, Curtis Samuel, KJ Hamler. Like, it makes sense to say, hey, we're going to shut down Kincaid. Now, this is where you need one or two of these other guys to step up. And then that will open things up for Kincaid. I think he'll be okay, but it sucks that this is how his season started. It was just a bad week for tight ends in general, right? Like Laporta, Kelsey, Kincaid, Andrews, who we haven't even gotten to yet, McBride, Kittle. What? None of them scored over like 6 or 7 fantasy points. Mari Cooper was bad. He had what would have been a long touchdown just hit off the tips of his fingers. Justin Jefferson did get into the end zone. 4 catches, 59 yards, and a score on 6 targets. They didn't need to throw it much. He was still able to produce. Sam Darnold was quality. He was efficient. Again, already mentioned this with Aaron Jones. It was against a poor team. And so we'll see how that looks this week against San Francisco. And then moving forward, they have other quality defenses coming up: Houston, Green Bay, the Jets. So we'll learn more about Darnold in that Vikings offense in the next month. But good returns in week 1. Yeah, this was about as bad as it could have gone for Peter. Not much to speak of on the bench. Ezekiel Elliott did score. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what you do at running back 2 right now, because Jaylen Warren wasn't very involved. He had 4 touches. He's coming off an injury. Elliott, I guess you just kind of hope that he, can score a touchdown most weeks. He's going to be in a good offense. He'll probably be the goal line guy. You're hoping for 50 yards and a touchdown. But these pass catching options need to step up. Metcalf, Kincaid, Cooper, they need to be better, or Peter's going to get off to a rough start. And I think there's enough reason for concern with each of them for different reasons. Metcalf has other quality players in that offense. Geno Smith is iffy. Cooper's dealing with Watson, who I don't know what the fuck happened to Deshaun Watson. He can't play anymore. And then Kincaid, if teams are just going to say, we're not going to let him beat us, then that's going to hurt him. But they're all talented, and that's why you drafted him where you did, and so you're believing in that talent. But it certainly was a discouraging beginning. Okay, one more matchup now. The A Train, 89.14, defeating Dylan, 71.34. Awful. Just awful matchup. We had 2 players score more than 12 in this entire matchup. The 2 quarterbacks. Everyone else was under 12. Come on. What kind of a joke is this? 7 of Dylan's 9 players were in single digits. Start with Andrew. Josh Allen, matchup MVP. 33.5 points for Josh Allen. That's why you take him where you did. That's why you take him 29th overall. The guy's a tank. He had that freak rushing touchdown output last year. What did he have, 16? He starts his season off with 2 this year. Uber efficient passing, 18 of 23 for 232 yards, 2 passing touchdowns as well. The guy's awesome. Awesome in real life, awesome in fantasy. High floor, high ceiling, he has it all. And they're going to have to lean on him all year, because that offense is a little bit barren and devoid of talent. And so it's going to be on Allen to find a way, and he did this past week. If you're Andrew, you're feeling really good about taking him where you did. Some people might have called it a reach. Fuck him. You got yourself the best quarterback in fantasy football. That's a big advantage every week. He scored 40% of Andrew's points. Like, if he didn't have Josh Allen, you're looking at a 70-point performance like what Dylan had. James Cook, he did James Cook things. This is James Cook's career. Good yardage output, he doesn't score. I've been saying it. He does not score. He has 4 rushing touchdowns in his career. He had 2 last year. Allen had 15 or 16. And it started the same way it's been. And so that's why I was out on Cook where he was being drafted. You need him if you're going to take him 20th overall. He needs to get into the end zone. And I just don't know that it's going to happen because Josh Allen is a fucking tank. Why would you give it to this tiny guy when you have Allen? We'll see. But yeah, for Cook to work out. But see, this is what's weird about having Cook and Allen. Like, Cook getting those rushing touchdowns means they didn't go to Allen. And so, like, yes, it's nice that I already talked about this. It's nice that you're getting the rushing touchdown, whoever it comes from the two, but you can never get it from both. And so that lowers your ceiling. You're never going to have a week where those two combine for like 5 rushing touchdowns. It's just never going to, it can't happen. Whereas if you had Allen and Saquon Barkley, those two did combine for that. Or if you had Allen and maybe Derrick Henry, Allen and Devon Achane, there could be weeks where they combined for that. But with Cook, it can't happen. And so that was my issue with that draft pick. CeeDee Lamb, you know, it is what it is. He had 10 targets. That's good. They were finding ways to get the ball to him. He had 3 carries. So he ends up with 8 touches. Nothing special. Didn't expect much from him after sitting out, waiting for his payday that he received. And then in a game where they were blowing out Cleveland, you're not needing to air it out. Better days ahead for Lamb. Devontae Smith had a very Devontae Smith game. 7 for 84 on 8 targets. Great player. Don't know if he's ever going to be great for fantasy as long as A.J. Brown is there, but you do know that Smith is a just fantastic talent who's going to have good moments and should at least be, pretty reliable, giving you this, 10 to 12 points at worst. Calvin Ridley was bad. He did have 7 targets, but Will Levis was not good. And so that's concerning. Because, Andrew's really kind of all in on Calvin Ridley. Thought very highly of him. He did get him in the 6th round, so it's not like it wouldn't really matter if he doesn't pan out, but regardless, you would have liked to see more. Tajay Spears, he's not going to be startable in the role he currently has. 8 touches. That's just not enough. Zach Moss, 11 touches, right? The only difference between him and Spears is that he scored. So I don't know. I think Andrew's got issues at running back too. His hope will have to be that the Bengals offense improves. And then Moss is at least kind of like a 15 touches guy with decent touchdown equity. That's got to be what you're hoping for. Lad McConkey scored in his NFL debut. That could end up being a flex option. 7 targets. Like, and it wouldn't shock me if that's a guy Andrew's going to in that flex spot some point soon. But let's get into the big one of the week, the big story of the week, Mark Andrews and, Isaiah Likely as well. So first thing I'll say is, purposely, I will not be releasing these videos each week until after Fab processes. I don't want anything I say or anyone who's on here. I don't want anything that's said on this to sway bidding on Fab. So this will never be released before that goes through. My take on this situation, Mark Andrews, 2 catches, 14 yards on 2 targets. One of the worst games of his career. I feel very similarly to it as I did Kincaid. When you look back on it, I was seeing it in real time. They were bracketing Mark Andrews. They were double teaming him. They were trying to take him away. And they did so. And so my belief is that he's going to be perfectly fine. Mark Andrews also got into a serious car accident like a month ago and missed practice time. So it makes sense that he wouldn't come back and, be his 100% self. Not worried about him. Well, I'm actually a little bit worried about him, but it's only because of the nature of their offense. I'm not worried about him, like in the sense that I don't think he's now suddenly washed or he's going to suck. But that team doesn't throw the ball very much. And so I think there are going to be more weeks like this from Andrews where you don't get a ton of production. And that's because of Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely has, since he came into the league, been highly thought of. Anytime he's gotten an opportunity, he has looked good. He is very talented. And it makes sense that in his 3rd year, he's ready to take on a role. Now, do I think he's suddenly the top tight end there? No, not at all. I think Andrews is certainly still the number 1 target in that offense. But when you look at it from the Andrews perspective, the fact that there's now another mouth to feed in that offense is bad because of what I just said. They're going to have games where they throw it 25 times. So if you have a game where you throw it 25 times and you've got Andrews, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, and then those complementary pieces of Bateman and Justice Hill and Nelson Aguilar, there's not that much to go around. And that hurts Andrews' floor in my mind. From the Likely perspective, I do not at all see why people want to go all in on him. This is the first big Fab target in our league's history, moving to that system. Likely is the first big option to claim off of waivers. And I think it would be an atrocious mistake to bid more than 25 on him. I broke it down that I think if I was Krieger or Nothdurft, the two teams in our league that are most tight end needy, I would bid somewhere between 20 and 25 for Likely. If I'm Andrew, I would bid between 15 and 20. And that's simply because Likely holds less value to Andrew than he does to Nothdurft and Krieger, because Andrew will never start both of those guys at the same time. He only exists as an insurance policy in case Andrews gets injured. So he's essentially a handcuff. Whereas Nothdurft and Krieger, they could start him the rest of the season if he works out, if he pans out. And then you have these wild card teams of Dylan and Horvath who have tight end injuries. I don't expect either of them to get likely, but they have short-term tight end injuries where it would maybe make sense. But if likely goes for over 25, I really think it's a big mistake, because for him to be worth more than that, he essentially needs to replace Mark Andrews. Again, because of the nature of their offense. Like, you're banking on five to 10 targets, and I just don't know that it's going to be there every week. Not unless Mark Andrews is suddenly a non-factor, and I just don't see any world where that's possible. So what I can say about likely, he holds immense value as, an option in the event that Andrews gets injured. So he holds value there. It's kind of like Jordan Mason with McCaffrey. You know that if something happens to the starter, you've got yourself an elite option. So that's valuable. And you know that likely he just proved that he has a ceiling that few at the position do in the entire league. There aren't many guys who can go out there and go 8 catches for 112 yards or whatever he just did, and he had 1 touchdown, very nearly 2. There aren't many guys capable of doing that at the position. And so you're buying into this really high ceiling and the potential for something to happen to Andrews, who has missed time with injury in recent seasons. But to me, the floor on likely is horrific. Like, it wouldn't shock me if this week he goes out and has 1 catch for 12 yards. I think that's the issue for me on bidding high on this guy. As long as Andrews is around, I just think that 2/3 of the time, you're going to be getting sub 5-point performances. Now, maybe you look at that and say, well, I'm okay with that because I think he's going to give me some more 20 to 25-point performances. And who's to say he won't? But he kind of, where I have him is somewhere in between George Kittle and Taysom Hill, who are both boom or bust options at the position. And is that really worth dumping like half of your budget on? To me, it's not. I would rather just try to piece it together with someone like Colby Parkinson. I can bid $2 on Colby Parkinson. And while Nakua is out, he might give me some decent weeks, and then maybe I'm able to swing a trade at some point in the season or something else. I would rather do that than take this big risk on likely. That's where I stand. I think it's a really interesting situation because you can look at it from different perspectives the way that I just did. But ultimately, where I'm at is I think it's a 20 to 25 fab situation. And I'm going to be very interested to see. I mean, we've hit 255 in the morning. This thing might process very soon. I'm very, very interested to see how this plays out. Dylan was the losing team. There's not much to like. CJ Stroud had a decent fantasy game. Again, pocket passer, right? Like, he had a great game. 24 of 32, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a really good game. But he only gives you 13 rushing yards. So for fantasy, 21 points is nothing special. He ends up the quarterback 8 on the week. And this was in a horrible quarterback week, as was already mentioned several times. You need 300 yards and or 3+ touchdowns, or it's not going to be good for fantasy from a pocket passer. Jonathan Taylor, it didn't go great, but the encouraging thing, so he gets into the end zone. That saved his week, allowed him to get up to 10.8. The encouraging thing is that he was everything. I believe he had 100% of the Colts running back rushing attempts. I don't think Trey Sermon saw any. So, that Taylor's their guy. With Zach Moss gone, Taylor is their guy. They're going to ride him. They should be a run-heavy team. The only thing you're hoping is that, and that was correct, by the way, no other Colts running back received a touch in this game. The only thing you're hoping is that Anthony Richardson doesn't vulture him too often, because he might. DeAndre Swift, bad. Real bad. 10 for 30, no receptions. I don't know. I don't know that he's going to be good this year. I didn't really feel good about him coming into the season. DJ Moore had a down game. I think he'll be fine. It just Caleb Williams wasn't good. So, and none of the Bears pass catching options were going to do much. Devontae Adams, you don't love to see this. 6 targets. It's bad. He needs to be a double-digit target guy, because that's not going to be an efficient offense. That's not going to be a high-scoring offense, so he needs volume. If he's not getting volume, he's not going to be good. So that's what you hope for. You hope that volume goes up, and then Dillon ends up with those 2 injuries. Puka Nacua, that's just devastating. That's devastating. First one half into the season, you're going to lose him for a month. I don't know how you replace that in the short term. And then Jake Ferguson went down. He's probably going to miss a week or 2. They're not ruling him out from playing this week, but he's got an MCL sprain. And so I'd be pretty shocked if he doesn't sit out at least this week. So you're going to have to find a tight end, and then you're going to have to go to your bench, which didn't really perform, and plug one of these guys in for Nacua. It's going to be tough for Dillon. But he has talented players on his team. So what you'll hope for is to have Jonathan Taylor show up big. You'll hope for Devontae Adams to show up big, DJ Moore. And that's kind of what you're going to be counting on with some of these injuries that you're dealing with. But yeah, really, really couldn't have gone worse between the poor production and the guys going down. I mean, that's terrible. All right, so that's gonna do it for our nice matchup breakdown. Power rankings. Let's get to that. I'm gonna go with Nothdurft and Sam up top. Then a bit of a tier break. Horvath, me, Larar, Krieger. That's kind of a tier to me. Mecca, Lorran, Colin, Peter, Andrew, Dillon. It's a bit of a mosh, mix and match. I'm losing steam. I'm sorry. I'm losing steam. But yeah, 7 through 12, Mecca, Lorran, Colin, Peter, Andrew, Dillon. I think you can mix and match those. I don't feel too strongly about any of that. I do like Mecca's team the most of that group, just from a potential perspective. And Matt, who I was texting a little bit, Matt Mecca, he provided his own power rankings. He's going to go with Nothdurft, me, and Sam. Then he's got Horvath, Krieger, and himself. He's got Larar at 7. And then he's got Andrew, Peter, Lorran, Colin, and Dillon to round it out. So not that much different than me. I think all of them were I think we were within 2 spots on almost everybody and within 3 spots on the entire league. I think it's, early on, it's a little hard to do this. You need more data, and you don't want to be going off of such a fluky week 1. But yeah, let's look ahead to week 2. Let's take a look. We have hit 3 a.m. Has Big Fab processed yet? Reloading the league. Wow. I mean, this computer is an atrocity. It has not. It has not processed, as I am soon concluding this recap that, per usual, went longer than I wanted it to. I'm taking on Dylan. You feel pretty good about that if you're me, but I take nothing for granted in this stuff. So you never know. Sam Andrew, that's a fun matchup. I think Sam has the edge, but Andrew, if he could get big games out of Allen and Lamb, especially if Sam is without Achane, Andrew's got a chance to pull an upset there. We've got Krieger Horvath. That's a really enticing matchup. I give the edge to Horvath in that one, and that would be big. If he could start off with another win and move to 3-1 or even 4-0, that would be a great start for his season. Krieger will be looking to prevent that. Nothdurft against Lorran, you got to give the edge to Nothdurft in that one. That did look like the best team in the league right now this past week. Peter Colin in a battle of 0-2 teams. That is the only matchup featuring 2 0-2 teams, and the team that loses that is going to be in some early season trouble. I kind of like Peter to pull out the victory. As of now, he's projected to lose by 8. But I do like Peter to win that one just because of the uncertainty at quarterback for Colin. Whereas Peter has Jalen Hurts. To me, that's the difference in the matchup. And then it's Mecca against Larar. And I like Mecca to win if McCaffrey sits. If McCaffrey plays, I think it's a true toss-up. But yeah, Mecca might be getting Larar at a good time if indeed McCaffrey misses another game. So yeah, that's gonna do it here for week 1. Week 1 recap is in the books. And let's hope for some better offense, because no one wants to see, what did we have in week 1? 5 teams under 100 points. No one wants to see that. Let's get those scores up. But I'm excited to see how Fab goes down in the next however long before ESPN. Why can't ESPN just do it consistently at the same time? It's so fucking ridiculous. But yeah, we'll see. I'll probably be awake because here I am. I've made it to 3. I got to be up at 6. So what's the point of 3 hours? But yeah, we'll see how it all goes down. And week 2 is almost upon us. Goodbye.